I am Carol Peters. I am thrilled to see so many of you, so many familiar faces, but then a lot of new names and faces as well. I am proud to serve as the president and CEO of United Way Next. And we are kicking off today the first of a three-part series focused on wellness. So if you're like me, sometimes I let stress get the best of me and don't always take time for self-care. So I'm really interested in this subject. I'm especially excited to introduce you to Kerri Strauss, our guest speaker. And Kerri is a United Way Next member. She has been actively involved and engaged in the work that we do. She's on our Engage and Exchange work group, which helps plan our programs that we offer to all of you. And she's also an interim executive professional who has gone through the Third Sector Interim Executive Academy. So she participates quarterly in our roundtables that are offered for those individuals who have gone through the academy. So I know there are several people on the call today who probably know Kerri from that experience and other ways that she's plugged into United Way Next. And I know she's going to share a bunch about herself personally, as well as how she's involved with United Way Next. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kerri to kick us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. And thank you to Carol and Caitlin and the entire United Way Next team, who are just fantastic to work with. I really appreciate the United Way Next staff and board, and being a member, I found it to be very valuable. And this was not a pre-planned plug for United Way Next, but just to share with everyone that there's excellent resources, through the United Way network. I was a United Way director of a local United Way for 10 years, and I stepped down 2 years ago to start my own consulting business and also to do the interim leadership, as Carol mentioned. I'm currently serving 6 to 9 months for the Editorial Freelancers Association, which is based out of New York City. And it's a 501c6 membership-based organization. So a little bit of a different experience than the United Way background. But again, these things all connect, the nonprofits and giving back to the community. And, this wellness piece, of course, I think ties into all aspects of our work. So without further ado, I am going to do a screen share and get us started with this presentation for today on turning stress into wellness. And if I could just have a thumbs up that you are able to see the PowerPoint, terrific. Excellent. So we are going to have hopefully some great discussion today. I am excited to share with you about turning stress into wellness, because this is a topic that I've been passionate about for a very long time. Going back to when I was in college working on my master's degree in social work, I was working full-time as a graduate assistant, and I was taking classes full-time. And then I also had a part-time job to offset the cost of college. And I remember my mentor, my boss at the time, who I really considered a mentor, had kind of said to me, well, you have a lot on your plate, Kerri, but I'm going to give you more. And it was this concept of like giving things to people that were busy because they could handle them. And so I took a lot on my plate. And I think a lot of us do that over the years. And so kind of evaluating, like, when do we have too much on our plates? Or, what is this with stress? And we hear this so much now with burnout. And so I've been fascinated about this topic for years, and I'm really hoping that I'll be able to share some of the things that I've learned with you over the years that I think are helpful. And we'll get into some of these, strategies and techniques, and then hopefully a really great discussion as well. So clearly, we all juggle a lot every day in our lives with work, family, exercise, household chores, all of the commitments that we have. And often many of us do feel like we're running on E. I think this graphic really shows, kind of that level of exhaustion and empty feeling that we too get sometimes. So sometimes it's like we feel like we can't catch up. Perhaps we feel overwhelmed, short-tempered. Maybe this even affects our, amount of sleep that we can get at night. And these feelings can be physically and mentally draining from time to time. But what happens if those feelings are not temporary? And so when stress is not successfully managed and feels permanent, that's when burnout can occur. And so kind of to make you think a little bit about this one question I like to prompt in the beginning. If you could change one thing about your daily routine, what would it be and why? And so kind of, give some thought to that as we're discussing some of this related especially to stress. So the strategies and techniques that we will cover, hopefully will provide some of this burnout prevention. But to dive into this, we do need to explore exactly what is burnout. And so the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic stress that has not been successfully managed. So this is the key to this, is that it has not been successfully managed, because we all have stress in our lives. And so how do we successfully manage that stress so that it doesn't result in burnout? Some further details on burnout, and this is a complicated slide, but I think it's important to really understand the connection between the body, and the brain, and how stress affects us physically and mentally. And so the term burnout was first coined in 1974 by Herbert Freudenberger, referring to a chronic psychosocial stress. Burnout can cause fatigue, destroy ambition, sense of worth, even lead to depression. Stress can come from demanding work schedules, a bad management, a toxic work environment, unfair treatment or compensation, a personal struggle, etc. Lots of different stressors, even unexpected bad news. So when the demands of stress outweigh the resources to cope with them, that's when burnout is likely. And that's the arrow in the bottom left, is kind of this scale of when the demands outweigh our resources that we have to cope with them, that's when burnout is likely. So the key in defining burnout, though, is that it is chronic and not successfully managed. So stress does not cause burnout, but stress plus inadequate resources causes burnout. So trying to implement some strategies and techniques to manage that prevent that burnout is kind of where we're at to turn that stress into burnout. This is one of my favorite quotes. The bad news is time flies. The good news is you're the pilot, by Michael Altshuler. This is, like, I feel, a perfect example of kind of like, we all have the stress in our lives and we all know that the clock is ticking. But the good news is we can actually be the pilot and try to manage that. So a reflection on strategies and techniques. Strategies are the things that you think about, the decisions that direct your actions and your plans. Your techniques, though, are things that you do and things that you might improve in your day-to-day practice, skills that you work on. And so we're going to dive a little bit into some of these strategies and techniques. They're both very important and useful. So some strategies to manage stress. This daily evaluation, looking at our short-term and long-term goals, and self-discipline. I feel these are important to remind people that we do need to look at daily goals, look at our short-term and long-term goals, and find ways that we can implement and work towards those goals. Research shows that it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days to form a new habit. So on average, that's about 2 months to make a behavior automatic. And so this self-discipline piece, I think, is really important in terms of that we often don't need more self-discipline in our lives. We just need a better routine. And so just like we, have to tell children to brush their teeth every day, at the time you're an adult, you're brushing your teeth every day habitually. It becomes your habit. And so this concept of self-discipline, I think, can be really important in terms of helping to manage the stress in our lives. Positive mindset, I think this goes without saying, but in today's society, a lot of people, there seems to be a focus on the negativity. And so more and more, positivity that we can bring when we are evaluating our goals, especially, is just to set it with a positive mindset and to surround yourself with other people that also have that positive mindset. This discipline for continuing education, this one I really love, and I think it's so accessible now with technology. So, classes are now available online for anything that we want to learn more about. Of course, Google is always there for research. YouTube and podcasts, there's so many excellent resources that can be available for continuing education that are just at our fingertips right now. And so I think that can be a really good strategy too, to manage stress. I recently found a good website called 15minutesforme.com. This is, I think, a great resource to check out. It evaluates where you're at currently with the amount of stress. And so it also helps to set up the 15 minutes a day, preferably first thing in the morning, although some people, may prefer to do it before bedtime, but to set up a 15 minutes routine that takes you through the most important things in your short-term and long-term goals. So the 4 A's to cope with stress, most of us have heard of these before, but I think they're definitely worth mentioning again if you haven't revisited them recently. So the 4 A's being the alter, adapt, avoid, and accept. And so the avoid, alter, adapt, and accept. And I really think this is important, to ask ourselves in our daily schedules. If you were thinking back on that first slide, like the one thing that you're really dreading in your schedule, maybe it's something that's obvious every day. Maybe it's something that's avoidable every day, and you just haven't addressed it to say, is this something that I need to do, or is this something that I can avoid doing? Because if you can just flat out avoid a stressful situation or a stressful aspect to your job or whatever it might be, there's certainly ways to evaluate the avoid strategy. One that a lot of people, I think during COVID especially, learned is maybe if they had a long commute and they were now able to work virtually, or do like a hybrid, only going into the office 1 or 2 days a week, avoiding a stressful commute can be an easy way to alter if that is a stressful part of your daily routine. Alter, of course, would be to communicate clearly, let people know your expectations, your capabilities, like setting your limitations in advance. Something like, I only have 5 minutes to talk, or I'm going to need another week to complete that project. These are ways that you can alter a stressful situation. On a personal level, it can be something like, if hosting parties at your house is stressful, then consider going to a family member's house for the party, so you can alter the environment to avoid the stress. Adapt may include adjusting your standards or reframing the issue. If that long commute is unavoidable, maybe try downloading a new podcast to make it more enjoyable. So find ways to adapt to whatever that stressful situation might be. And the accept. This one is by far known to be the most difficult. When you cannot avoid, alter, or adapt, having to accept a stressful situation, because sometimes things, like that unexpected news that may be permanent, has to be something that you eventually come to accept, the things that you cannot change. And accepting, also, if there's things that you can't change, of course, in other people, but you have to start with yourself and understanding that acceptance. Some other techniques, I found that it's generally best to avoid 2 high stress days in a row, and generally best to not avoid 2 days of prioritizing yourself. And so when I was looking at that evaluation of like, let me include too, the dread scheduling. If you haven't heard of this one, is like when you look at your calendar for the next week or the next month, and you get that feeling of just dreading all the things that are on your schedule because it's maybe too much. It could be that there's just these high stress days. And since I've been using this the last couple months, I found this to be very helpful, where not backing two days back to back that are high stress days. So having 1 day a week that you might have these back to back Zooms, or, running here and there and everywhere. And maybe it's a combination of the work schedule with whatever your personal schedule is, and, with your family, or et cetera. So having 2 days that are not back to back a high stress, and then also trying to get those 2 days in a row where you're not skipping sleep or going for that walk that you want to do, or whatever those priorities are for yourself. And so trying to look at that dread scheduling and to kind of reschedule it to avoid the 2 high days, and to make sure that you don't have the 2 back to back where you're not prioritizing. Other ways can be to build in planning time using Microsoft Teams, for example. That's one that I found to be really helpful. There's a lot of apps out there, amazing technology. I think a great sign of our times, and something that's really useful for people to remember, is that we have the technology that we can use for us. We can't, of course, let the technology use us and dictate our lives, and that time-consuming drain that we sometimes get kind of pulled into from watching endless YouTube videos or whatever it might be, but instead using the pieces of technology that can really help us, like to look at our calendars and to reprioritize, to not have the dread scheduling, and to use Microsoft Teams or programs like Asana for task management and project management, so that we're becoming more efficient in how we're able to do our work through technology. And another technique is to keep it in perspective. Just last week, I had a board member that reminded me, we are not running an ER. And I think this applies to, other United Ways and nonprofit organizations. Is yes, the work we're doing is very important. Yes, it's valuable, especially as a nonprofit, the community impact work that you're doing. But at the end of the day, you're not running an ER. And so to kind of keep that in perspective, like, what is really important to evaluate based on hopefully your strategic plan, and evaluate based on the goals that you have, you know, both for yourself and for the organization, and to keep that in perspective that not everything is going to be done every day, and that having a slower pace can actually help to make you like be able to work more efficiently. So ultimately, it's trying to achieve that work-life balance. I think a lot of us, you know, try to find that kind of work that we feel is really valuable, that we're able to contribute to, have a sense of purpose through our work. That's an ideal match, is when we quote unquote love our jobs, you know, when we're so passionate about the work that we're doing that it feels to also enhance and give us purpose in our lives. But again, we have to have that balance of not prioritizing too much of work without your personal life being balanced in there as well. And so being able to evaluate that, you know, both our jobs, and to delegate where necessary, take control, actively manage our time. And another technique in the great work-life balance is to get a mentor and be a mentor. And this one I think is really important all the way back from college. So for about 25 years now, I have always had a mentor, and I've in the past years now, I'm also a mentor. And I find it to be extremely beneficial to actually help with the work-life balance as well. Of course, it helps, you know, the individual that you're mentoring too. And so I highly recommend to everyone to get a mentor and be a mentor. And that will change throughout your stages of your life, you know, depending on what type of mentor that you need, and also what type of mentor that you can become. And I'm sure Carol would be more than happy to help facilitate to anybody that's interested in that through United Way Next. And this iron sharpens iron. I really like this concept of trying to find the people that you need in your life to be around to help you with where you're at. Because again, at different stages, you know, there's different things that you may be needing that especially contribute to this work-life balance, to make yourself feel balanced and not stressed. And so finding people at your whatever stage of life that you're at that are going to really help you is that concept of like the iron sharpens iron. Physical and mental health. I think this is so important to mention that, you know, back to that brain body connection. When we're stressed, of course, it affects us physically. And so there's no doubt, you know, with the mental connection that's going on in the levels of burnout. I also think that right now, kind of in society, there's this idea of saying like, oh, I'm so busy, and it's become a part of our culture to kind of say how busy we are. And so just to reflect on that mental health, that it is okay to say, you know, I'm doing well. I'm evaluating things, I'm taking charge, I'm the pilot, you know, I'm in control, and I'm really working on my mental health. And so just to address that, and to not be able to deny that the physical and mental is connected. And you don't have to have this like rite of passage to tell people like, I'm so busy and I don't know where the hours go and I never get enough sleep and I'm just go, 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 that it doesn't have to be that way. Instead, it really you can have a focus on your mental health that of course relates to your physical health, and that will help overall with your positivity and decrease the amount of stress. And so there's really 5 main ingredients that I found, and this is from various resources that I've pulled, but they all seem to kind of fall into the main 5 categories of sunlight, movement, nutrients, social, and sleep. And so for sunlight, this can be getting at least an hour a day of sunlight, be it first thing in the morning or just before sunset, or if you're able to escape on a midday walk, or even eat lunch outside if possible. Sunlight is definitely known to affect our moods and to help us physically and mentally. And that can easily, you know, be combined with, like I said, a walk or something that you're also doing that's a physical activity outside in the sunlight. Very important to get away from the computer. Movement. This can include cardio, resistance training, balance training. You do what you can. There's major improvements that can be made from getting off the couch and walking, even more so than going from like walking to running. And so just moving and keeping the body moving, of course, we know affects us physically and mentally. Nutrients. Some people call this like counting macros, which I've recently gone down a rabbit hole of understanding. But just in all honesty, trying to understand, you know, that what we eat, what, you know, be it fat, carbs, protein, whatever it might be, it definitely affects our bodies. It affects our moods. It affects us mentally and physically. And every person's different with this. You know, some people have things that they know that they will eat and instantly feel sleepy, and other people are hopped up on coffee all day. And so just looking at our nutrients, making sure we're drinking enough water, this is really an important aspect to reduce stress. The social, this includes all of our interactions from our family, even our job and what we get from it socially, and it can really contribute overall to our positive mental health. And sleep, getting enough sleep every day. And again, this is different for everyone, but to figure out what that amount is for you and then try to prioritize not missing more than 2 days a week in a row of getting that adequate sleep can greatly enhance well-being. So some more techniques and resources. Using the iPhone for your personal focus time. For Android workers, you can, there's different techniques through the different levels that we can use to set up where maybe we're not automatically checking emails. Or if it is more efficient for you to have the emails come to your phone, maybe that is a more effective way to use. But again, it's finding that technology that's going to work for you and having it work for you instead of you being reliant on it telling you these notifications that maybe are distracting. And so if that's something that you do find is distracting, you can set that up through your iPhone to take that distraction away. There's a Breathe app that can be really great for meditation, reflection, relaxation. This, I think, is another great resource. Of course, there's many apps available. And a shutdown routine. This is a link to a website, and hopefully we'll be able to share this PowerPoint afterwards. But this is 20 minutes at the end of each workday. That's kind of a wind down routine. And so some people love to do their first thing in the morning. Some people love to do the 20 minutes at the end of the day. So I just tossed this in as another great resource to be able to do like a shutdown routine. Additionally, I found that the clarity break is a really great tool to use. And this comes from the entrepreneurial operating systems worldwide.com. And to have a clarity break really starts with like, what's the most impactful thing that you're doing? Are your short-term and long-term goals aligned with those? And, and picking like what your 3 priorities are is also included in a clarity break. And just, are you prioritizing things and are you working on things throughout your day, your week, your month that are working towards those goals? And if you're not, why is that? So you'd either need to alter your goals or alter the activities that you're doing. And there's also a piece included on that. That's the I am statement. And this really leads with the, taking ownership of our schedules and leading with an I am and what you feel that you can be responsible for. And another great resource I love is the 10-10-10 rule. So will this thing that's really stressing me out right now, will it matter 10 minutes from now? Will it matter 10 days from now? Will it matter 10 months from now? Or some people even extend this out to 10 years from now. And so really looking at a way just to kind of help to keep things in perspective. All ways to achieve, hopefully, this wonderful work-life balance. So next, I'd like to dive into the SWOT SOAR. This I find it can be a really helpful resource as we're evaluating stress and burnout. What used to be the SWOT analysis, I think a lot of people are familiar with the strengths, weaknesses, and aspirations and threats. And so the SOAR analysis is kind of the adaptation to that. Honestly, it's a bit more of like a positive aspect than the SOAR analysis. So it takes the strengths and the opportunities is really where we want to get to next, our aspirations, what are our goals, and what are the results. And so SOAR can be something that can be used individually within your own self to look at your own goals as you're setting maybe those short-term and long-term goals. And it also can be used for an organization. And I've used it for both. I find it to be very helpful. And on venturefounders.com, there's a great tool that can walk through the SOAR analysis if that's something that is new to you. Another application for analysis that can be used for organizations and yourself is what is called stay interviews. If you haven't heard of these before, they're kind of similar concept to, well, I shouldn't say similar. They're kind of the opposite concept to an exit interview, but utilizes the same format. And so most of us know what exit interviews are, which is essentially when somebody is leaving an organization, or if you adopt this personally, like what went wrong in a relationship or what went wrong with, a family issue, a stressful situation that might be in the family. But it's the exit interview is kind of the what went wrong, and it's looking very reactively to the situation. Versus the stay interview concept is like, what is going right? What, you can ask if you are managing, a team, like, what do your team members enjoy working for your organization? What are the things, what is going right? And what would it take for them to be able to stay so that you hopefully don't have to get to an exit interview? And so the say interview concept is really way more proactive rather than the exit interview that's reactive. And I think these are some good resources, like I said, that can be applied to an organization and can also be applied on a personal level. So I'm going to pause to really ask what's standing out right now, and hopefully we can do some sharing and some Q&A. I have at least 2 other resources that I do want to be able to share with the group, but I want to make sure that we can take some time to get some great discussion going. And so I'm actually going to end my screen share so that we can see each other. And my final slide just included a thank you and be well. So let me do the end screen so we can all see each other. Great. So what is standing out to you right now? How are people feeling? And kind of assuming that maybe part of why you came today is that you might feel stressed, you might feel burned out. Maybe you don't, if anybody wants to share where they're at along that spectrum. And if there's, anything that I brought up that you have questions about, now's the time that we can have some discussion.
This has been great, Kerri. Thank you. So people, you're more than welcome to unmute yourselves. If you're incredibly shy, you're happy, you obviously can make commentary in the chat, and we can either read that or read your questions there. So if there's anyone who'd like to start, go ahead and unmute and we'll continue the conversation.
Well, I don't mind sharing. Kerri, thank you. That was, you know what? It was an excellent reminder of what we need to be doing to alleviate the stress in our life. No matter, I've retired 3 times now. I still don't have a handle on it, So it's like we're always dealing with time and projects. But one thing that I did find helpful for me when I was in the early days of my career, and I'm gonna put that in the context of my 30s, I organized my life goals in decades. So I looked at what was really important to me and I put it in the context of decades so that I knew I wanted to write and I knew which decade of my life I wanted to write. And now that's all I'm doing is writing because this is the decade. Now, thankfully, I've lived long enough to transition through those decades. So that's a blessing. But there were others, like travel was one of them. But with what you said, where you have the family, you have the work responsibilities, you have the educational aspirations, and you have all of this stuff lined up. It's just sometimes you just have to set aside what you want to do with what you can actually accomplish. And so I just really appreciate the context that you presented and just the reminder of how important it is to take care of ourselves along the journey.
That's great, Patricia. Thank you so much for sharing. And as you said that you kind of prioritized your goals by the decades of your life, but then mentioned writing, to me, I thought, oh, the chapters of your life, too, is kind of like we're all at different stages, and what's a priority, when we're in our 20s is not the same as in our 40s, and it's not the same as our 60s. And I think that's a great point, is that evaluation, will change, those goals will change, but to be able to at least reflect on it, I think is the important part, is to have that discussion and have other people that you can talk to about those goals. And just being willing to evaluate your own life instead of just letting the rat race kind of make the years fly by and you don't know where the time went. And then you realize you're 60, 70 years old and you never wrote that book that you wanted to write. And so it's great that you were able to prioritize that based on the decades. And to me, I'm thinking the different chapters. So thank you so much for sharing, Patricia. I'll call on Amber. I see a hand is raised.
Hello, my name is actually Mary Beth. I'm in the room with Amber. I have a question, Kerri, about the I think it was called the personal focus tool that you can find on Apple phones or iPhones. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And is it a separate app or is it an Apple product?
So I think you're asking if it's an app or a product within the tool. So within settings, there are options to do personal focus. Those relate mostly to your like notifications. So, you know, turning off, like if you don't want to receive a notification every time there's an email, or for some people, they just flat out do not connect their work email to their phone or even personal email. Like if some people want to use the phone as just truly like their personal phone and not have it connected to any type of work. But within settings, there's a lot of those personal tasks tools that you can use. Separately from that can be different apps to download. And so I think, you know, you have both options. If anybody else has experience with iPhones or Androids and during a lot of these sessions, I pick up little tips on things that can be done. So if anybody else has anything that they want to share related to a great app or a great setting that they found that they didn't realize, you know, that you could turn off notifications and instead do like a push notification so that if you want to see the emails, you have to go into the email app and then it will let you know if there's new messages. David, did you have something to add to it or a different comment?
I just wanted to share that I really work to only check emails twice a day. My email is mine, not the other way around. I'm not my emails, and it has allowed me to focus, allowed me to get work done that I wanted to get done, not the work that other people wanted me to get done, and sometimes, not always, but I do clarify and sometimes my email signature that I check email twice a day. So if you really need me, call me.
That's great. And I love that you set those boundaries too. I think the trend is definitely moving in that direction because I've seen it swing where it's like everybody's expected to respond to emails 24/7. And it's unfortunate because I'm glad to see that it's starting to swing back. And I think that comes from even like management levels down. And so if you are a boss, if you are a manager, please make sure that you're leading by example and not sending your employees emails over the weekend or, you know, off hours. And that everybody starts to respect more of those rights. And David, I love that concept of like, I use that email for what I need it to be used for and not just like my whole workday is not just responding to that email when people are reaching out. Something I want to share too that I think is really helpful that relates to the question about using these, you know, apps and these tasks is just whatever calendar system you use, build right in there your own like planning prep times and clarity, you know, like the clarity breaks if that's something that you're following, or just your own like time to be able to focus on your own work that's not getting consumed by emails and other people. And so I've recently started adding that directly into my phone, like for this 1 hour every day, it's my own planning time where I'm not on email, I am not answering the phone, I'm not doing any other tasks. And it's really like a focus time that you can use. And, you know, different programs allow you to build that into where if you have a shared calendar system that other people on your team can also see, oh, Kerri's in her focus time right now, not available. That means not able to be contacted during that time. And I think it's important to be able to set those boundaries. Abby, what would you like to add?
No, I was just saying that, you know, part of the strategy that I've had, I think that I've developed because of the pandemic was one, my phone is always on, at least my personal cell phone that people tend to use and get notifications, it's always on silent. And so I get to choose when I want to check all of that. And I think we're also trying to build a culture within the organization that kind of like what you said, you know, you have me for the time that I'm here in the office. When I go home or when I leave the building, unless something is burning down, it can wait until tomorrow or the next work day. And so I think we're trying to kind of build that kind of same set of expectations within like the team also. And And then I think the other thing that was helpful for me was, well, United Way Worldwide used to have, they're eliminating that, like, subscriptions to the Calm app. And it's also kind of like a great, like, 5 to 10 minutes meditation, just breathing, that you can do, and other things that you can do, like even when you're driving during your commute. That's really helpful and kind of just centers you and kind of gives you a different perspective on things. And then the last thing that was helpful, but it might not be applicable to every other workplace, is that we also have pets in the office. So specifically when I have my dog in the office, I need to get up and take the dog, outside. So I'm forcing myself to walk around the block twice a day for like 15 minutes at a time. And so it's good. And sometimes people walk with us, right? Like, that don't have any dogs, so that you can kind of clear your head and get ready for the next section of work.
That's great. I love that. And that's kind of a good tool to be able to get you outside, get you moving, and maybe it facilitates like a walking meeting. That's something else that I think, people are starting to move in that direction of, why do we have to always be sitting in front of a computer to talk, with technology and with, even Zooms. I think a lot of times we're like mostly consumed with like using Zoom and email now, but we can go back to the telephone and using, an earbud and going for a walk. And so are there ways to do that instead of having to sit in front of a screen on Zoom? And I feel that Zoom's kind of taken over because of, just the transition into the post-COVID world, and a lot of meetings are on Zoom. But if it's a one-on-one, or if it's something, in the office, like you said, Abby, that you're able to like get outside with the dog and go for a walk and bring a staff member along, that can be your staff one-on-one meeting while you're walking the dog. So it's it can be
I do like
real
when
win-win.
your tip about, like, look at your calendar and make sure you don't have 2 consecutive days that are so heavily scheduled. And I think we all, maybe it's just me, we have the tendency to kind of schedule Zoom meetings without any breaks in between. And so that's also kind of like a simple, like, I'm like, I should have done that.
Right. And the default on Zoom is to usually have a 1-hour schedule. And so if you're booking something in and you just default it to the hour, that can be detrimental to your schedule. But if it truly could be like a 30-minute meeting, put it in as a 30-minute meeting. And that sets the expectation for the person you're meeting with too, to say, this can be accomplished in 30 minutes. And so that might be another way. Barbara?
Yeah, thanks, Kerri. Lots of great tips. And kind of as Pat said, even though I'm retired, I still have stressful days. You think it's kind of crazy, but you volunteer too much and you got a lot of work on your plate, and it happens. So I loved all your different suggestions, but you reminded me of one that I learned from a great volunteer, and it could be in your sort of wind down session. But I've always been a great list maker of all the things I need to get done in a day or the next day. And this volunteer said, at the end of the day, instead of looking at your to-do list, create a list of what you accomplished in the day. And that's just like an awesome way to be able to walk out of the office and feel like you got things done. Even if nothing on your to-do list got done because your day fell apart, there's things you did accomplish. And so that always was helpful to me to say, yeah, I really did get some stuff done. It might not have been what I thought I was going to get done, but so just another thing to add to the list.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. I really appreciate that. And I love that you still have to-do lists in retirement. We all have the to-do list. Something that I've recently discovered with to-do lists, because I also went down a rabbit hole on this one, was that I was one who loved to write down everything on a to-do list so that I could cross things off. But I realized that most days I was trying to cross off the things that were the easiest to do. And I was, in fact, doing like the easiest things just to be able to cross them off. There is something to be said about that, because you get that sense of like satisfaction that you had some things taken off the list. But I've now learned to like move the top 3 that really do need to be done, those then get built into my focus time the next day or the next week, so that it's not like week after week, there's certain things that are maybe the bigger projects that are not getting crossed off the to-do list. So I do find them to be really helpful, but I guess my suggestion would be to examine your own strategy with to-do lists and make sure that you are in fact, like kind of prioritizing to make sure that you're not just using them to like have the feeling of crossing things off, which I absolutely love. So I don't discredit that. But like I said, it's it can also be used as a priority tool to be able to then set those like long-term goals. And then in order to accomplish them, you could build that into the focus time. Carol, your hand is up.
Yeah, so I just want to share, I love that you talked about the dread scheduling piece, and that, you know, I think we just, as no matter the role we play, we fill our plates so full, and then we dread this when it shouldn't be that way. We should really be finding joy in it. It could be something that you're really looking forward to, but then it becomes this dread thing because you overcommitted yourself. And then I love the stay interview. And thinking about all of the people that we deal with on a daily basis, whether you're a leader of a team or you're working with donors and you're having to do these interviews, it's like, why wait for them to exit to have this conversation? Let's talk about now. And it reminded me that I was able to do that with my staff recently. And we just talked about like, how is everything going? What's going well? What could we change? Let's make some modifications now versus they become frustrated and then they come to me and say, I'm out of here, right? So I love that. And I think that what this comes down to is, for me, I always say to my husband, who reminds me that I should be winding my day down at a certain time, I'm my own worst enemy because I'm the one making my schedule. I'm the one creating the invites. I'm the one extending the invitations, and I'm the one booking these back to back to back meetings, right? So just being more mindful about that, more strategic. So one thing that always helped me is I look forward 90 days and then work backwards so that I begin to make sure that the September board meeting with our United Way Next board, which Barbara and I talked about last week, isn't until September 11th, but we already have it planned with the draft agenda and we're working forward. And then that takes all that pressure off so the pressure cooker isn't bubbling all the time, which ultimately for me would create stress. So thank you. I really appreciated everything you shared so far. And to everybody else for your wise thoughts. It's really great.
It is great. And I love the stay interview concept, Carol, something that I think is really helpful from that I've noticed personally, and I've heard others find as well, is like the extra things that can be done for a team that may not even require money. But just like if you hear somebody say, well, I wasn't getting enough recognition, or I, really wanted to take advantage of some more opportunities, or I wanted a title, promotion. Like sometimes, you don't want to wait until you're hearing that an employee's leaving and they're upset because they never got the title promotion, or they never, they wanted more flexibility with their schedule. And then you go, well, I could have offered that, or we could have worked around this. And so I think it's really helpful to take the time to do those stay interviews, because it may, it's definitely worth the time to not have to like do a search and rehire and, to have employees that are upset. And so the theme that I'm hearing you say, Carol, is kind of like, you're either going to put in the time now or you're going to be putting in the time later. And so by taking the time to do a stay interview now, hopefully you prevent an exit interview. And, by putting in the time now with evaluating your schedule, and like you said, working 90 days out, which is amazing, to hear about project like people, September, October sounds so far away. And it in fact is not, but that you may be stressed like for those upcoming events. So how can you take bits right now to plan on it? And I think it's that, to me, that's kind of like what's on that scale, is that we're either going to spend the time now trying to prepare and evaluate and figure out how we can prepare for it, or we're going to be spending the extra time later in a much more stressful manner because it feels so last minute, when it could in fact, have been kind of addressed ahead of time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other thoughts or concerns? And I do want to share, just being cognizant of the time, I just will share that, I guess, in our follow-up, because I did see Carol nod that we'll be able to share out the PowerPoint. So I had two other pieces that I think are really helpful. I recently read the book called The Secret Pulse of Time, and by Stephen Klein. It was fascinating. It was mind-altering in terms of like how we think of the clock. And so if you're fascinated with this topic and you're interested in, the amount of stress and scheduling and kind of the some of the strategies and techniques that we talked about, but just bringing it back to the basic of like how we're ruled by the clock, and we don't have to be. We can be ruled by like our priorities and what's most meaningful to us. I'll include a link for that and a very, very short description. So like a 1 page or 1 paragraph summary. So I'll include that in the follow-up because I think that it's really helpful to kind of keep that in perspective is exactly what the clock and what time and that concept as a whole means to us. And another piece that I recently heard was from Harvard Business School, Christina Wallace. She's a HBS lecturer, and I'll send the link that includes the reinventing yourself and the career mentality. And this question that so many of us have now is like, how do these multi-generations work together? And, like how kind of the younger generations prioritize their time a little differently. And so I think it relates a little bit to some of what Barbara's comments were, but it might just be helpful in terms of looking back on a new concept of like our career mentality and how we use our time that we work, and that the time that we're there is for the organization, is for the community, et cetera. But then we also can have our own personal time that's truly for us. So thoughts, questions? I'm going to check the chat and see if I'm assuming that if there's anything else that came up in the chat, we might be able to share out.
I've been watching the chat and I think we're in good shape. I did mention in the chat that we will be sending out the PowerPoint presentation as well as a recording link. So anyone who registered, for those who missed it today, we're sorry you weren't here, but we're hopeful that they'll take the time to listen in. And for everyone else, just so you know, we do record these. So if you ever go back and see that there's an event that you missed that you want to be a part of, you can click on the link, which is on our website, to find that information.
Great. And I see Abby shared another book as a great resource, Leadership on the Line by Ron Heinzfitz. Terrific. Thank you so much, Abby. I will check that one out. Wonderful. Any other thoughts or questions, or does anybody feel like they have something new that they're planning to take on, a little tip from today that they might be able to incorporate into their schedules next week or into their lives in the future?
Well, I'll admit something to all of you. As a real human being who likes to be transparent, I've been working really hard at managing my schedule this summer because I figure, like everyone else, it's summer and we get to take a little bit of a break, right? And breathe more often than just feel like we're running on the treadmill. So I've been building out time in my schedule intentionally with some breaks so that I can actually work on some of the projects that I hope to be able to accomplish this summer. And I know I need to have room in the schedule in order for those things to happen. So that way I'm looking really forward to the next few weeks and just some pauses instead of feeling so much back-to-back meetings. So excited about that. And you've reaffirmed I can do that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time and interest in this topic. I think, it's important to recognize that obviously we're all in the same boat. We're all human. We all have stress in our lives, but hopefully we can, through adequately implementing the use of resources and finding more resources and realizing, kind of tying back to my opening, scenario of like, how can we keep taking on more? How can we keep giving tasks to the people that are the busiest? And the fact is that if we find the resources that are available to us or keep exploring what options are out there and looking at other people that are in similar situations, or reaching out to a mentor or, through networks like United Way Next, that we can realize that we're not alone. We're all in this together and we're all going to feel different levels of stress throughout different parts, different chapters of our life. But there are resources available and that we are all, here to help each other. And I hope that kind of helps everyone feel a little better, and that hopefully if even just one person is not fully burned out, and maybe, you know, you can get your teams to not be fully burned out, and you can set this new culture of like, we got this, you know, we're going to work passionately during the time that we're going to, but we're also going to strive to have a good work-life balance. And so I'm really appreciative for everybody being interested in this topic and for sharing today.
Thank you so much, Kerri. This has been a great session, and I want to invite all of you back to join us on Thursday, September 21st, for our next wellness session, which will be, our guest speaker is Kate Reed, and Kate is a member of United Way Next. She's a burnout prevention specialist, trauma-informed consultant and trainer, and her topic is entitled, How to Cultivate Internal Peace When There's External Chaos. So we welcome you back for that session. Caitlin, thank you for everything you do for our team and facilitating the session behind the scenes of the technology. Caitlin will be sending out a follow-up email that will include the recording link, the PowerPoint presentation, and a link to the satisfaction survey. And so we really value your input and would appreciate if you took the survey, so that will help us to determine the things that you loved about today's sessions, things that we could be doing differently, and anything in between. And just know that we are a community of United Way leaders, and we're made up of retirees, alumni, current United Way staff, and local United Way organizations. We want you to know that you have a seat at the table. And so we invite you to be a part of United Way Next, and join us for any upcoming events that you see on our calendars. We look forward to seeing you all around. If there's a need for a mentor, don't hesitate to email me directly, or you can chat me here and say, I'm looking for a mentor, and I'll be happy to find someone who can fill that role for you and be a good partner. So thanks again, everybody, for being here, and we'll stay on until the end. If there's any other questions, feedback, feel free to stay. Thanks again.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
thank you, Kerri.
Thank